Forget the swords and the channeling. Rand al'Thor's greatest struggle isn't with the Dark One, but with his own mind. His journey isn't just a physical quest, it's a terrifying descent into psychological torment. Prepare to see the Dragon Reborn in a way you never have before as we uncover the true mental price of saving the world. Because here's the truth, anyone can fight with a blade. Anyone can learn to wield the one power. But how many can face the crushing weight of destiny? The knowledge that failure means the end of everything, and the equally terrifying knowledge that success might cost you your very soul. Rand al'Thor is not just a hero in the Wheel of Time. He's a case study in the destruction of self, in how trauma, paranoia, and unbearable pressure can transform even the kindest farm boy into someone the people around him no longer recognize. And that's what makes him compelling. When we first meet Rand, he's simple, honest. A shepherd boy in the Two Rivers, more concerned with his friends, his father, and the next village festival than the fate of nations. He's the picture of innocence in a world already filled with shadows. But the wheel doesn't spin stories of comfort. Rand is chosen not because he asked for it, not because he wanted it, but because he must be the Dragon Reborn, the one soul fated to stand against the Dark One. That's a destiny no sane man would ever want. And almost immediately, you see the cracks begin to form. At first, it's small, confusion, denial, a desperate clinging to normalcy. Rand doesn't want to be different, doesn't want to be dangerous, doesn't want the weight of prophecy pressing down on him. But destiny doesn't ask permission, and every time Rand reaches for the one power, he touches madness itself. Because in this world, saidin, the male half of the power, is tainted. To wield it is to open yourself to corruption, to risk losing your mind piece by piece. Imagine fighting with a weapon that will eventually kill you, even as it's the only thing that might keep you alive. Imagine knowing every moment of strength you gain pushes you closer to insanity. That's the psychological prison Rand can never escape. But what makes his story so devastating isn't just the taint, it's the loneliness. Think about it. Who can truly understand him? His friends love him, but they fear him. The Aes Sedai want to use him, manipulate him, even cage him. Every ruler, every army sees him not as a person, but as a symbol. The Dragon Reborn, a weapon to be wielded. And so Rand begins to isolate himself. He closes his heart, pushes people away, convinced that his destiny requires him to stand alone. He builds walls, not just against enemies, but against those who care for him most. This isn't just strategy, it's survival. In his mind, attachment is weakness. Love is a liability. Compassion is a crack in his armor that the Dark One will exploit. But every wall he builds makes him less human. Every sacrifice he makes eats away at the farm boy from the Two Rivers, leaving behind someone harder, colder, more terrifying. And yet, this is what makes Rand one of the most fascinating protagonists in fantasy. Because we are forced to ask, what is the cost of being a savior? He doesn't just fight Forsaken. He doesn't just rally nations. He fights himself. Every single day, he wakes up haunted by voices, not only his own thoughts, but echoes of Lu's, Therin Telamon, the last dragon. It's as if history itself is inside his skull, screaming, accusing, begging him to make different choices. Is he reincarnated? Is he mad? Or is he both? That's the knife's edge Rand walks. And for readers, it's chilling. Because the line between destiny and delusion gets thinner with every chapter. The more Rand embraces his role, the more he loses himself. We watch him make decisions that seem ruthless, even monstrous. He uses fear as a weapon. He threatens those who oppose him. His anger becomes volcanic, his paranoia suffocating. And yet, deep down, he's still the boy from the Two Rivers, still the son of Tam al'Thor. Still, the young man who just wanted to protect his friends. That tension is heartbreaking. because the farther he goes, the more it feels like that boy is slipping away forever. There are moments where you ask yourself, is Rand still a hero, or has he become something else entirely? And here's where Robert Jordan's genius truly shines. Most epic fantasies tell stories of external battles, the good guys versus the bad guys, the hero against the villain. But the Wheel of Time dares to ask, what if the greatest battle happens inside the hero himself? Rand doesn't just represent strength. He represents fragility. He represents the truth that saving the world might break you long before the last battle arrives. This is not a power fantasy. This is a tragedy in slow motion. And yet, there's hope. Because even in his darkest moments, even when Rand is consumed by anger, paranoia, and despair, there are glimmers of light. Small reminders that humanity cannot be erased so easily. Acts of kindness that slit through the cracks in his armor. Memories of Tam's wisdom, of Egwene's friendship, of the people he's fighting for. Rand's struggle isn't about choosing between light and dark. It's about holding on to himself while standing at the edge of the abyss. By the time we approach the climax of his journey, Rand is no longer just the Dragon Reborn. He's a living symbol of what it costs to carry the world on your shoulders. His story is both inspirational and terrifying. Because we can't help but ask ourselves, if we were in his place, would we endure? Or would we shatter? That's the brilliance of Rand al'Thor. He's not just a hero. He's a mirror. He forces us to confront our own fears, our own fragility, our own battles with identity and purpose. So, the next time you think of the Wheel of Time, don't just remember the grand battles, the forsaken duels, or the march toward Tamon Gaidon. Remember the farm boy who became the dragon. Remember the way his smile disappeared, the way his hands shook, the way he fought not only armies but his own unraveling mind. Because Rand al'Thor's greatest enemy was never the Dark One. It was himself. It was himself, and that's why his story matters. The Dragon Reborn. It's a title wrapped in fire and shadow, glory and doom. To the people of Randland, the dragon is not just a savior, it's a curse reborn. He is the man who will stand against the Dark One at the last battle, yes. But he is also destined to bring terror, destruction, and death. The prophecies do not paint a picture of a triumphant hero. They paint a portrait of someone crushed beneath a fate no sane person would accept. And for Rand al'Thor, the moment the words of prophecy begin to point in his direction, his world collapses. The early prophecies, a crown of thorns, born of a maiden, raised by the old blood. He shall be marked, and he shall break and remake and be the breaker of worlds. Even before Rand realizes the truth, prophecy isolates him. The Karaethon cycle. The collected prophecies of the dragon acts like a script he cannot escape. No matter where he turns, there is a line written centuries before that seems to dictate his path. Instead of a roadmap of hope, it becomes a cage. Think about the very first revelations. He was not just any boy from the Two Rivers. His birth was written in the stars. His mother was a maiden of the spear. His father, not the man he called Dad, but Janduin of the Aiel. The story of his origin tears away his identity, separating him from his people, his heritage, even from Tam, the man who raised him with love. From the start, prophecy doesn't give Rand purpose. It steals it. It tells him, you are not who you thought you were. You are something more, and you will never belong again. Madness. A ticking time bomb. If prophecy isolates Rand, the taint on Saidin destroys him from within. In the eye of the world, when Rand first channels unconsciously, it is a moment of salvation. He saves his friends from certain death, but woven into that victory is a curse. Men who touch the one power go mad. Not maybe. Not possibly. Not possibly. Every moment of strength becomes a reminder that he is walking toward insanity. He knows what it looks like. He's heard the stories of men who channeled, tearing down cities in madness, killing their families, leaving scars on the world. He knows that every time he reaches for the power, he risks becoming the very monster people already fear. Imagine carrying that. Imagine knowing that your greatest weapon is also your slowest poison. Imagine feeling Luz Theron's voice whispering in your head, blurring the line between past and present, sanity and delusion. Rand lives every day with a time bomb in his skull, and the more the world demands he use the power, the closer the explosion comes. The crushing burden of saving the world. What makes Rand's story so devastating isn't just prophecy, isn't just madness, it's the unbearable weight of expectation. In the beginning, he's just a boy who wants a quiet life. He wants to marry Egwene, to help his father on the farm, to live in peace. But almost overnight, that possibility dies. Moraine's words in Eamon's Field change everything. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. That line becomes Rand's prison sentence. He doesn't get to choose. The pattern has chosen for him. By the time he accepts, he is the Dragon Reborn. The entire world has already placed their bets on him. Nations expect him to lead them. Armies expect him to save them. The Aes Sedai expect him to obey them. And yet, at the heart of it all, Rand is still 19. A boy from a farming village suddenly forced to carry the knowledge that if he fails, the Dark One wins. This is the essence of his torment. He cannot refuse. He cannot walk away. If he puts down the sword, the world burns. If he fails to unite the nations, the last battle is already lost. Robert Jordan makes this weight clear again and again. Every death, every betrayal, every failure piles onto Rand's shoulders. The women he cannot save, the friends he pushes away, the kingdoms that resist him. By the middle of the series, he isn't just hard, he's brittle, cracking under the strain of being more symbol than man. Isolation as a defense mechanism, prophecy, madness, and burden create the perfect storm. And Rand's solution: wolves. He convinces himself that love is weakness, that compassion will only destroy him. If everyone he cares for is a target, then the only way to protect them is to cut them off. This self-imposed isolation is what leads so many to see him as cold, ruthless, even terrifying. But that's the tragedy. Rand isn't heartless. He's bleeding inside. Every wall he builds is a desperate attempt not to crumble under the eyes of the world. He must be strong because if he breaks, there is no one else to stand in his place. And that is the true cruelty of prophecy. It demands a savior, but denies him the comfort of being human, a mirror of myth and reality. What makes Rand's story so enduring is how it echoes real mythological archetypes and yet deepens them into something painfully human. Like Heracles in Greek myth, Rand is tasked with labors that would break any mortal man. Like Christ in Christian narrative, he carries the sins and hopes of the world on his shoulders, marked for sacrifice. Like Odin in Norse legend, he suffers not only for wisdom, but because his destiny demands pain. But unlike those distant mythic figures, Rand is written with vulnerability. We see his doubts, his fear, his anger. We see him struggle to reconcile the boy he was with, the symbol he must become. And in that struggle, Jordan gives us not just a hero, but a mirror. Because who among us hasn't felt the weight of expectation? Who hasn't feared losing themselves to the demands of others? Rand's journey takes those very human fears and magnifies them to a cosmic scale. The price of destiny. By the time Rand reaches his breaking point, he is no longer simply the Dragon Reborn. He is the embodiment of the cost of destiny. Every scar on his body, every voice in his head, every relationship torn apart is a reminder that saving the world isn't noble. It's annihilation of the self. And yet, here's the miracle. Rand does not shatter. He bends, he breaks, he falls into darkness. But there remains a spark, however small, of the boy from the two rivers. And in the end, It's not prophecy, not power, not even the taint that defines him. It's the choice to keep going. The dragon's prophecy is not a story of triumph, it's a story of survival. It's about carrying a weight no one should have to bear, and still taking one step forward. So when we talk about Rand al'Thor, don't just picture the blazing sword, the duels with Forsaken, or the final confrontation with the Dark One. Picture the boy standing alone against the silence of prophecy, the creeping dread of madness, the crushing weight of destiny. Because Rand's greatest victory was not in breaking the Dark One's hold, it was in refusing to let the burden destroy him first. In a story as sprawling as the Wheel of Time, the battles are not only fought with steel and the one power. Some of the most devastating wounds are struck with whispers, betrayals, and broken bonds. For Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, trust is not a gift, it is a liability. And as his story unfolds, we watch trust corrode, paranoia grow, and the once open-hearted shepherd become a man who cannot tell friend from foe. This is not just a tale of enemies on the battlefield. It is the story of how whispers and betrayals erode the very foundation of Rand's humanity. Friends and mentors turned pawns. Early in Rand's journey, trust is his lifeline. He has Tam, the steady hand of a father. He has Mat and Perrin, his brothers in arms. He has Egwene, the childhood companion who shares his heart. And, of course, he has Moiraine, the Aes Sedai who guides him from the two rivers into the vast, dangerous world. But what happens when those pillars begin to crumble? Consider Moiraine herself. She is mentor, protector, and manipulator all at once. Rand depends on her knowledge of prophecy, of the one power, of the world itself. But at the same time, he knows she has her own agenda, her own loyalties to the White Tower. Every piece of guidance comes with the sting of uncertainty. Is this for my good or for hers? That doubt grows, gnawing at Rand's trust. Even his friends become tangled in webs of politics and prophecy. Egwene rises as Amyrlin, forced to act not as childhood friend, but as rival authority. Mat, with his strange luck and shifting loyalties, becomes unpredictable. Perrin struggles with his own path, torn between duty to Rand and the call of the wolves. What once was friendship becomes fractured by destiny, until Rand can no longer tell where loyalty ends and betrayal begins. It is a cruel irony. The pattern gives him companions, but the very weight of being the dragon isolates him from them. The web of Aes Sedai manipulation. And then there are the Aes Sedai. The White Tower has always seen the dragon as a weapon to be used or destroyed. From the moment they learn of him, they scheme to gentle him, to bind him, to control his every move. The kidnapping at Dumai's Wells is perhaps the clearest scar on his psyche. The very women sworn to serve all reduce him to a prisoner, caged and beaten, paraded like a beast. Even after his rescue, the memory never leaves him. How can he trust when the supposed guardians of the world treated him as less than human? Robert Jordan drives this point home by showing how these betrayals are not always loud or violent. They are whispers, half-truths, hidden daggers. Every Aes Sedai smile hides an agenda. Every alliance conceals a trap. For Rand, this constant manipulation becomes unbearable. He learns to see plots everywhere, and most of the time, he isn't wrong. But suspicion, once seeded, never stops growing. The rise of paranoia. With every betrayal, Rand's mind twists tighter. He begins to see enemies where none exist. He questions even the loyalty of those who would die for him. Lose. Perrin's voice in his head only deepens the spiral. Is it madness? Is it memory? Or is it a symptom of his own unraveling? Whatever the truth, the constant whispering feeds Rand's paranoia. He starts to act as though betrayal is not a possibility, but a certainty. There's a chilling moment in Lord of Chaos where Rand considers killing those closest to him, not because they've betrayed him yet, but because he believes they inevitably will. This is the psychological price of living in a world where every ally might be a pawn of the shadow. Even his romances become poisoned. With Elaine, Avienda, and Min, his love is real, but twisted by suspicion. He fears their deaths more than he values their lives, and so he distances himself, convinced that intimacy will only give the shadow another weapon against him. The farm boy who once laughed with friends at Beltane bonfires has become a man surrounded by shadows even in daylight. Impossible decisions, global consequences. The worst part? Rand's paranoia is not unjustified. He lives in a world where betrayal isn't just personal, it has global consequences. Every decision he makes can topple nations, kill thousands, or hand the Dark One an advantage. Take the decision to break the seals. On one hand, keeping them intact risks the Dark One's corruption leaking into the world. On the other, breaking them risks setting him free entirely. This is not a choice between good and evil. It's a choice between catastrophe and apocalypse. And Rand must make it alone, or consider his dealings with rulers. If he shows weakness, they betray him. If he shows strength, they fear him. Every alliance is temporary, every victory fragile. Trust becomes impossible because the stakes are too high. Robert Jordan repeatedly places Rand in these no-win scenarios, and each one erodes his humanity further. How can he remain the boy from the Two Rivers when every decision he makes leaves corpses in its wake? The shadow. Within, what makes Rand's story so haunting is that his paranoia is both flaw and survival instinct. Yes, it isolates him. Yes, it drives him toward tyranny. But it also keeps him alive. The shadow is insidious, infiltrating every level of society, turning friends into assassins, mentors into manipulators. Even the Forsaken delight not in open battle but in sowing doubt, whispering lies, twisting trust into fear. By the time Rand faces the last battle, he is not just fighting the Dark One. He is fighting the erosion of his own soul, the hollowing out caused by whispers and betrayals. A hero crushed by trust's collapse. And yet, this is precisely why Rand al'Thor is one of the most compelling heroes in modern fantasy. He is not a shining knight whose trust is always rewarded. He is a man who learns painfully that trust is dangerous, that betrayal is inevitable, and that the only way forward is to harden himself to stone. But in that hardening lies tragedy. For every betrayal he anticipates, he loses a piece of his own humanity. For every friend he suspects, he distances himself from the very people who could save him. The erosion of trust is not just a theme in his story. It is the crucible that forges the Dragon Reborn. So when we think of Rand's journey, let's not only remember the duels with Forsaken or the fiery battles that lit up the skies. Let us remember the quieter, sharper wounds, the betrayals that cut deeper than any sword, the whispers that hollowed him out, the paranoia that turned friend into foe. Because in the end, the last battle was not just fought on the fields of Shaiol Ghul. It was fought in Rand's heart against the poison of mistrust. And his greatest victory was not in defeating the Dark One. It was in finding, at the very end, the strength to trust again. It is the shadow that stalks every step of Rand al'Thor's journey. Long before the last battle, before armies clashed or the Dark One stirred in earnest, the Dragon Reborn fought an enemy far closer, within his own mind. For in the Wheel of Time, saving the world is not only a matter of strength or prophecy, it is a matter of surviving yourself. The voice of Luz. Aaron! The first true sign comes as whispers, a flicker of words, a sudden echo in his thoughts. At first, Rand dismisses it. Stress, fatigue, the burden of command. But the whispers grow louder, sharper, until they form a voice. Luz Terran Telamon, the last dragon. The man who lived 3,000 years before, who fought and failed, who killed his own family before taking his life in despair. And now, that broken soul lives in Rand's head. At times, Luz Therin offers insight, knowledge of the power, memories of the Age of Legends. At times he rages, screams, and begs for death. His presence blurs the line between reincarnation and madness. Is Luz therein truly alive within Rand? Or is this nothing more than the creeping rot of the taint? Robert Jordan leaves the question deliberately uncertain, forcing the reader to share Rand's terror. To believe you are the Dragon Reborn is already unbearable. To hear the voice of a dead man and not know if he is real is a torment few could endure. The taint's corruption. Of course, the source of this madness lies in Saidin itself. The male half of the One Power is tainted, a wound left by the Dark One's counterstroke against Luz Therin and his 100 companions. Every man who channels walks a doomed path. No matter how strong, no matter how noble, the corruption creeps in, twisting thought, corroding sanity, until nothing remains but destruction. Rand knows this. He has seen the fate of other men who channeled raving, dangerous, consumed by chaos. Each time he seizes Saidin, he feels its oily corruption, the foulness of the shadow threading through him. It is not only a battle to control the power, it is a battle to control himself. Imagine holding a sword where every swing cuts not only your enemy, but also your own flesh. That is what Saidin is for Rand. A weapon and a curse, salvation and damnation bound together. The alienation of power. And the more powerful Rand becomes, the farther he drifts from humanity. His command of the power grows staggering. Mountains move, cities tremble, armies scatter at his will. Yet each act widens the gulf between him and the people he seeks to protect. How can a shepherd from the two rivers remain the same when he wields the power of gods? How can he laugh with his friends when he sees their lives as fragile, fleeting, always one misstep away from annihilation? Rand begins to walk in two worlds at once, the world of men and the world of demigods. And in that space between, paranoia festers. He wonders constantly, do they fear me or love me? Am I still their friend or merely their weapon? Power isolates him, and isolation feeds the madness. Moments of fracture. There are scenes throughout the saga where Rand's internal fracture becomes undeniable. In Lord of Chaos, his capture by the Aes Sedai shatters him. Caged, beaten, humiliated, he hears Luz, Therin screaming, urging him to slaughter them all. When he finally explodes at Dumai's wells, raining fire and destruction with the Asherman, it is not the triumph of a savior. It is the unleashing of a man on the brink, fueled by rage, despair, and voices that may not even be his own. In the gathering storm, the darkness within him deepens. He grows colder, harder, willing to use terror as a tool. There is a moment atop Dragonmount when he nearly chooses annihilation, nearly gives himself over to despair completely. The voice of Luz. Therin no longer feels like a haunting. It feels like a merging, as though Rand himself is dissolving into the madness of his past life. And the most terrifying part? Rand knows it. He has moments of chilling clarity where he admits, I am losing my mind. To recognize your own descent, to stare into the abyss of madness and see yourself falling is perhaps the cruelest awareness of all. The Symphony of Madness. The brilliance of Jordan's writing is that Luz Therin's voice never feels like a simple symptom. It feels like a symphony. One voice among many, layered with Rand's doubts, fears, and desperate hopes. At times, Luz Therin is enemy. At times, ally. At times, indistinguishable from Rand himself. This chorus of voices becomes the soundtrack of the Dragon Reborn's life. It isolates him from others, yes, but it also propels him toward his destiny. Without Luz Therin's presence, Rand might falter. Without the taint's agony, he might cling too tightly to the boy he once was, never embracing the man he must become. Madness, in a twisted way, becomes part of his strength, the terror of self-awareness. Yet the tragedy remains. Rand is not ignorant of his condition. He knows the taint is destroying him. He knows the voice in his head marks him as doomed. He knows his power isolates him beyond return. There is a moment in Winter's Heart, just before the cleansing of Saidin, where Rand reflects that he has been living on borrowed time. Every act of sanity has been a defiance of inevitability. And even after the taint is purged, the scars of those years remain. The Dragon Reborn is not simply a savior. He is a man who walked willingly into madness, fully aware of what it meant, because the world had no other choice. Rand al'Thor's struggle is not merely against the Dark One. It is against the voices in his own skull, the corruption of the power itself, the isolation of strength, and the terror of losing himself. A symphony of voices is more than a metaphor. It is the reality of the dragon's life. A chorus of doubt, despair, rage, and fleeting hope, all screaming within one fragile human mind. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of the wheel. That in the end, Rand endured not because he silenced the voices, but because he learned to live with them. Power. It is what every kingdom seeks, what every Aes Sedai covets, what every Forsaken weaponizes. But for Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, power is not a gift. It is a prison. The irony of Rand's story is that the stronger he becomes, the more alone he is. The boy from the Two Rivers, once surrounded by friends and laughter, finds himself walking a road no one else can follow. Because the burden of saving the world is not just about wielding the one power. It is about sacrificing everything human along the way. Power as a wall between loved ones. At first, Rand clings to those he loves. Egwene, Mat, Perrin, Nynaeve, they are anchors to a simpler life, proof that he is still just Rand al'Thor, Tam's son. But as his abilities grow, that connection frays. When he seizes Saidin, when entire armies fall before him, how can his friends truly understand? How can he laugh with Mat about pranks in Eamon's Field when he carries memories of Luz Theron's Age of Legends? How can he share quiet moments with Egwene when she rises as Amelin's seat, an equal in power but a rival in politics? Every step forward in strength pushes him one step further from the people who once defined him. Even his romances, with Elaine, Abienda, and Min, are poisoned by power. He loves them deeply, yet his presence endangers them constantly. They are targets because of him, pawns in the pattern's weave. Love becomes another battlefield, every embrace shadowed by fear. In this sense, Rand mirrors mythic heroes like Achilles or Gilgamesh, figures whose might is unparalleled but whose very greatness isolates them from the mortals around them. The toll of sacrifice. But isolation is not his only burden. It is sacrifice. Repeated, relentless, soul-crushing sacrifice. Rand sacrifices his innocence the moment he accepts that he is the Dragon Reborn. Gone is the shepherd's dream of a quiet life in the Two Rivers. In its place is a destiny soaked in blood. He sacrifices his freedom when nations demand his allegiance, when every word he speaks becomes a decree that could topple thrones. He becomes a ruler, not by choice, but by necessity, forced into a political game he never wanted to play. He sacrifices his relationships, pushing away those who love him most. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much. If the shadow will strike at his heart, then he will guard that heart by hardening it into stone. And perhaps most painfully, he sacrifices his own humanity. To the world, he must be unbreakable, the Dragon Reborn, the world's only hope. But inside he is fractured, tormented by the voice of Luz Theron, haunted by the taint, teetering on the edge of madness. Yet he cannot show it. Vulnerability would erode confidence, and confidence is the only thing keeping armies marching behind him. In the gathering storm, we see this truth crystallize. Rand becomes the very embodiment of steel, cold and ruthless. He believes that mercy is weakness, that to save the world he must abandon everything that once made him human. It is only on Dragonmount, staring into the abyss of despair, that he realizes the terrible cost. He has nearly destroyed himself before ever reaching the last battle. the mask of strength. This need to appear strong is perhaps the cruelest irony of Rand's fate. The world looks at him and sees the Dragon Reborn, blazing with light, wielder of unimaginable power. They do not see the young man inside, trembling, desperate for a moment of rest. Every ruler expects him to be a general. Every Aes Sedai expects him to be a weapon. Every soldier expects him to be invincible. How can he ever admit weakness? How can he reveal doubt, fear, or grief when the eyes of nations are upon him? So Rand wears the mask. He becomes harder, more severe, hiding his vulnerability behind the facade of the dragon. The shepherd's smile fades. The laughter of Emond's Field dies. In its place is a man others fear to approach, a man who has buried his true self beneath layers of armor. But readers are allowed to glimpse behind the mask. We see the moments when he falters, when he nearly breaks. We see him standing alone, consumed by grief after battles won at too great a cost. We see him clutching to fragments of Tam's wisdom, of Min's quiet comfort, of memories of the boy he once was. And in those moments, Rand becomes not just a hero, but a tragic figure. Because his greatest victory may not be defeating the Dark One. It may be enduring the crushing solitude of power without losing himself entirely. The tragic beauty of the Dragon Rand story reminds us of a universal truth. Power isolates. Whether in myth, history, or fantasy, those who bear the greatest burdens often stand alone. Kings, prophets, generals. Their decisions shape nations, but they carry those decisions in solitude. Rand al'Thor is all of these at once, and more. He is savior, destroyer, ruler, and weapon. And though the pattern demands it, the toll is immense. The burden of power robs him of laughter, of intimacy, of the simple joys that once defined him. Yet it also forges him into something greater. A man who understands, perhaps better than anyone, the price of sacrifice. So when we think of Rand, let us not only remember the blazing moments of Jori, the cleansing of Saidin, the uniting of nations, the final confrontation with the Dark One. Let us also remember the loneliness in his eyes, the sacrifices no one saw, the mask of strength he wore for a world too desperate to allow him to be weak. Because the wheel of time does not give us a perfect hero. It gives us a man, burdened, isolated, and scarred, who carries the weight of power even when it threatens to break him. And in that burden lies his true greatness. When we speak of Rand al'Thor's journey, it is tempting to imagine it only in terms of conquest and struggle. The Dragon Reborn who battled forsaken, united nations and faced the Dark One at Sheol Ghul. Yet the true heart of Rand's story is not found in the clash of armies or the blazing fire of the one power. It lies in something quieter, something more human. The transformation of a young man crushed by burden into someone who could finally find meaning, even solace, in the very destiny that once threatened to destroy him, the breaking point. Before we can speak of healing, we must recall the breaking. Rand's descent into cold ruthlessness in the gathering storm represents one of the most harrowing arcs in modern fantasy. He becomes a figure who believes that mercy is weakness, that compassion is an indulgence he can no longer afford. He distances himself from everyone, even those who love him most. On Dragonmount, Rand nearly surrenders to despair. Staring into the abyss, he considers ending his own life, convinced that his existence only spreads pain and destruction. It is in that moment, however, that a revelation strikes. If he must die, let it be not in despair, but in defiance. Not as a prisoner of destiny, but as someone who chooses to embrace it. This moment mirrors countless archetypal stories. Christ in Gethsemane, who prays for the cup of suffering to pass from him, yet accepts it for the sake of humanity. Siddhartha Gautama, beneath the Bodhi tree, confronting Mara's temptations before awakening to enlightenment. In literature, we find echoes of Frodo Baggins at Mount Doom, realizing the ring's corruption cannot be borne forever, yet pressing forward until salvation comes from another's hand. Rand joins this lineage of figures who are transformed not by triumph alone, but by a redefinition of what triumph means, from burden to purpose. What changes after Dragonmount is not the scale of Rand's power. He remains the mightiest channeler of the age, but the way he understands that power. Previously, Saidin felt like a chain around his neck, a poisoned gift that threatened his sanity and endangered everyone near him. After his epiphany, the same power becomes something different, not a curse, but a tool to serve the pattern. This philosophical shift cannot be overstated. Where once he believed himself doomed to madness and destruction, he begins to see himself as a necessary instrument, a thread deliberately woven by the wheel. In Towers of Midnight and A Memory of Light, this acceptance radiates through his actions. He no longer fights against his fate, but with it, leaning into the inevitability of the last battle, not as a victim, but as a willing participant. And here we see a profound psychological truth. Suffering is amplified by resistance. To feel trapped is to double the pain, but to see hardship as meaningful, even sacred, is to endure with dignity. As Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. Rand embodies this principle. His torment, once meaningless, becomes purposeful. The philosophy of renewal. Another element of Rand's recovery lies in his renewed relationship with the world itself. After Dragonmount, he begins to smile again. He notices the warmth of the sun, the simple beauty of clouds, the quiet resilience of life continuing despite shadow. This is more than sentimentality. It is a reawakening to what he is fighting for. For a long time, Rand fought to fulfill prophecy, to defeat the Dark One, to bear the title of Dragon Reborn. But after his breaking, he fights for life itself, for laughter, for green fields, for the possibility of joy. This echoes the philosophy of Albert Camus, who spoke of finding meaning in an absurd universe not by escaping it, but by embracing it. Camus writes of Sisyphus, condemned to push his boulder eternally. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. In a similar way, Rand's happiness does not come from escaping his duty, but from redefining it as a labor worth bearing, the legacy of healing. Yet we must not mistake Rand's shift for a magical erasure of trauma, to endure what he endured. The voices of Luz Therin, the weight of madness, the isolation of command, leaves scars that cannot fully vanish. What the narrative gives us is not perfect healing, but the possibility of recovery. After Shayol Ghul, Rand lives on in a new body, free of the one power, free of the taint, free of the unbearable spotlight. For the first time since leaving Emond's Field, he has a chance to be simply human again, to wander the world, to touch the soil without armies behind him, to rediscover the self that was buried beneath the mantle of Dragon Reborn. This raises a crucial question. What does long-term recovery look like for someone like Rand? History gives us few analogues, but we might consider the aftermath of great wars. Soldiers who survive do not simply return to who they were. They carry invisible wounds, but many also develop resilience, perspective, even gratitude for life. Rand's journey suggests something similar, not a return to innocence, but an integration of suffering into a deeper wisdom. And perhaps this is the most radical thing the Wheel of Time offers, that even the savior of the world deserves rest, deserves peace, deserves a future beyond sacrifice. Conclusion: the solace of acceptance. It is the story of a human being who learns to carry unimaginable weight without being crushed by it. His breaking on Dragonmount, his rebirth into acceptance, and his quiet departure after Shayol Ghul all testify to a universal truth. That meaning, not power, is what sustains us. In this sense, Rand's art transcends fantasy and becomes a parable. It tells us that even in our darkest struggles, when despair whispers that surrender is the only escape, there remains the possibility of renewal. That suffering, when given purpose, can transform from a burden into a calling. that even those who carry the heaviest fates may yet find moments of joy, of laughter, of simple human connection. When the wheel turns and stories fade into legend, the Dragon Reborn will be remembered for his battles. But perhaps what we should remember most is not the fire he wielded, nor the nations he commanded, but the lesson he lived, that even at the edge of breaking, one can find solace. Not by escaping destiny, but by embracing it with open hands. And in that embrace, Rand al'Thor became not only the savior of his age, but a symbol of what it means to be human in the face of impossible weight.